Welcome to the Love the Star podcast. I'm Bobby Belt, Dallas Cowboys insider for 105 through the Fan in Dallas, joined as always by former Super Bowl winning NFL scout Brian Broaddus. He is now the co-host of the G-Bag Nation 2 to 7 p.m. Central, Monday through Friday on 105 through the Fan in Dallas. He's also the pre- and post-game co-host on the Dallas Cowboys radio network, which that job is currently out of season for him. He's not doing that because obviously the season ended, and we're not bitter about that at all. We've moved on completely. We don't have any ill feelings. It's not making us say it still is a little bit. We're still a little frustrated by it. Brian, we had our first weekend without Cowboys football this past weekend. But as we kind of take a look ahead, and that's what a lot of this episode is going to be today, taking a look ahead to the offseason, things that they need to address, identify, what are the pressing needs as they head into the offseason, where things stand with the coaching staff and everything else. But before we dive into some of that, was there anything that you took away from this playoff weekend that you said, man, that's what those teams or a couple of those teams, that's just what they do different than the Dallas Cowboys? That's what has those teams closer to championship glory than the Dallas Cowboys.
You know, Bobby, when you watch the Packers play the 49ers, you realize how good the 49ers are in the middle of their defense.
Yeah.
You realize how good they are at linebacker and the safety play and stuff. And because it was very clear to me when Jordan Love threw the ball to the outside, it was, he was fine. When that ball went to the middle of the field, it was a problem, and that's where his interceptions happened. That's where they play the coverage. That's where you have these linebackers, Greenlaw. They make such a problem for you. And if you're good in that direction, and look where Green Bay attacked you, right down the middle of the field. And what you also see is, the ability to, with these teams, they do have an element of being able to run the football to when they need to run the football,
Sure.
And I don't think Dallas has that. And I think that we all kind of understood that really, 3/4 of the way through the season, Dallas wasn't going to be able to run the ball. And I'm not saying it has to be a full-on just running attack, but you just have to have the ability to do it a little bit. But I was super impressed with the way that some of these defenses played. I'm super impressed with it shows you how important special teams are when you start, running fakes and you're missing field goals and it's just important to have that kind of shored up the way it was. But to me, the lesson was, Packers did a great job of attacking the middle of your defense, and they exposed you for that. But then look what they did against a team that really has good up the middle, and that got them punished. So I'm all about linebackers and safeties and people that play the middle of the field for you on a weekly basis.
See, it's interesting too, because I think if you look at every team that's in the conference championship game this weekend, you mentioned San Francisco, but Baltimore, Detroit, and Kansas City, they all have pretty good linebackers.
They really do. Yeah.
I mean, Baltimore and San Francisco arguably have the best linebacker core in the
traded
NFL.
for one. They traded for one. They went out
absolutely.
And they got Roquan Smith, who, Baltimore could have sat there and just said, we're okay. We're good enough on defense. Queen he'll be fine. We'll be good. Well, they do. They go out and they get he's made a huge difference.
Yeah.
But that's
he's made Patrick Queen better. Yeah.
That's team building right there. That's going out and being willing to, maybe take on a contract, maybe re-sign a guy. Maybe, there's a lot of things you can do to make your football team better. I feel like at times Dallas has got a good roster, but when they can really make their team better, maybe they can't. Maybe the salary cap doesn't allow them to do things that, normal teams do. But man, I hope that's not an excuse. But at times I feel like it is. When I watch a team, get better at the trade deadline, a couple of times, then that gets my attention.
Yeah, and we talk about, again, not just Baltimore and San Francisco. You look at Detroit going and investing in Jack Campbell early in the draft, who they really like a lot. And, Alex Anzalone, and you look over in Kansas City, Nick Bolton is a really good football player and has helped them a lot. In fact, I think he's averaging like 13 tackles a game over the last 3 weeks. He's been a big time impact player for them. So as we look ahead to the Cowboys offseason and we say, after 2021, when they lost, the talk, Brian, was, man, we got to get more physical, got to get tough. We need glass eaters. After 22, it was, man, this offense needs to change. We need to reduce Dak's interceptions. Now that we enter this 23 offseason, when they get to Indy here in 6 weeks or a little under 6 weeks, what do you think when they talk to reporters for really outside of the Senior Bowl, their first real introduction to, hey, here, I'm taking a lot of questions from the beat here. What do you think the top list item we're going to start hearing about is it going to be, hey, we got to be better in the middle of the defense at all 3 levels. We need better defensive tackles. We need better linebackers. We need better safety play.
Yeah, I think they tried to. I think they tried to draft Mozzie Smith. I don't know what they're doing with Mozzie Smith now, Bobby. I really don't. And it's been some time again where Osa Odigizua starts off really well and then kind of fades at the end of the year. It's another one of those campaigns. Yep. I think their plan at linebacker to them was going to be good, but they gambled on Leighton Vander Esch not getting hurt, and they gambled on that Damone Clark was going to improve in year 2. And
overshown.
Overshown too, but he wasn't available for him coming out of they
didn't have great contingency plans in terms of depth.
They really didn't. And you can blame Dan Quinn for things and every coach will have to wear things. I think Dan Quinn was trying, and you've probably heard me on many of these platforms, Bobby, and other ones we've been on in our own shows. Dan Quinn was trying to cover up something that he couldn't cover up. I mean, the genie was out of the bottle.
Yeah.
He didn't have enough linebackers. He didn't have enough depth at linebacker, and that hurt them. And, to the credit of the kids that had to step in there and play for 13, 14 weeks at linebacker, it was tough. But they weren't, like I say, I don't know what the plan is for Mozzie Smith. I know watching Chris Jenkins Jr. play at Michigan, it is a schemed situation with their defensive tackles playing late off the ball. That is something Michigan does every time you watch them play. Their defensive tackles play, they're very read and react. That's what they are, very read and react. Chris Jenkins in this draft, he's a 3 technique, but he plays slow off the ball. He plays late off the ball, And so it's a Michigan thing. Now, tell me what they're going to do with Mozzie. Where are we going here with this? Are we going to be a 295-pound guy? Yeah, we'll see. But the narrative, I think the narrative coming out of, and it might even happen before at the Senior Bowl, Bob. It might happen when they meet at the Senior Bowl, that they start to talk about, Jerry Jones starts to talk about they need to run the ball better. Well, what did Mike McCarthy say they needed to do better? Mike McCarthy should have just come out and said, we have to limit Dak Prescott's interceptions and turnovers. We have to. And I'm sorry, I put it on Dak. He should have said this. We have to eliminate our offensive turnovers, because there were times when receivers weren't catching the ball and all that. But he chose to tell us they needed to run the ball better. And
run the damn ball.
Matter of fact, they did not. You know? So that's there's a couple of different angles that they can take in this. As we get to these all-star games when Jerry's going to be down there in Mobile, and then when we get to the combine.
Are they adequately tough? Do they pass the baseline for a team's toughness that you want?
You know what? I think they've got the problem, and Aisha Morrison brought this up today on the draft show, and I think she made a really, really good point. She says you have some tough players. The problem is the tough players are your veteran players. You kind of would think that with some of the younger guys would step up and be tougher in the way. They drafted Luke Schoonmaker to be a tough guy at the point of attack. He really wasn't, you know. They drafted Mozzie Smith as a 329-pound defensive tackle to play against the run. He really wasn't tough enough there, you know. There are things they talk about toughness in a way that most people talk about just going out and enjoying the day, you know. It's kind of like, oh, it'd be a nice thing to go out and do this and do that. But they're not. Now, they've got tough players. I think Donovan Wilson's a tough player. I think Tank Lawrence is a tough player. I think Zach Martin's a tough player. I think that Tyron Smith's a tough player.
I think Tyler. I think if you want to talk about young players, I do think
Tyler Smith
is tough.
I think that CeeDee Lamb has some toughness to him. The way and Jake, I think they got some tough players. The problem is they don't have of the 50, the 53 guys, they probably have 8 guys like that, So to me, we talk about. Would you
include Dak in that tough category?
Oh, sure. I mean,
and I wasn't saying you weren't.
It's easy. It's easy. Dak to me is always kind of a given,
Yeah.
When you start to talk about given, the toughness and stuff like that. But
I agree, and was not saying you weren't. But yeah,
no. That's the problem, though. That's what you're dealing with right now. Is that you've played against some teams this year, and you lost against some teams that you just physically weren't. You weren't tougher than them. Some of these teams get behind, like the Baltimore Ravens, and just using them as an example. The Ravens in that game against the Texans, it was even. The whole, the first half of the game was really even. Then you started to see the toughness take over for the Ravens in that game. And, the Cowboys, they don't have that ability. Buffalo was tougher than them. Buffalo schemed them, but they schemed them in a way that, like, Dallas, you can't stop the run. You're not tough enough to stop the run. So, yeah, we're going to hear Mike McCarthy talk about, and Jerry Jones. They're not going to mention toughness. They're not going to mention that. But they're going to mention, the other things, that running the football. They're going to talk about that. They're going to talk about having to maybe play a little bit better, be a little bit better up the defense, up the middle, at the linebacker spot and stuff like that.
You are listening to the Love the Star podcast, the Love the Stars and Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, as we talk about there, okay, they could clearly stand to get better in the middle of their defense at several different levels. They need to be tougher in a lot of respects. I think that's all a given. When we look at where this stands with the coaching staff, it looks like right now they're going to run back a significant portion of their coaching staff. I don't know that it's going to be everybody, but it's going to be a significant portion and a lot of your key players, I think. If Dan Quinn, if the musical chairs for a third off season sees him standing up, left without a chair, I think it sounds like he's probably back. And it doesn't sound like they're going to chase him off, but I don't think they're necessarily going to fight to pay out the nose to keep him here if he gets a job offer, like they would have in the past off seasons. But assuming
you can't give him any more extension if you're not going to extend Mike McCarthy.
Oh, sure. 100%.
You can't do that. Yeah.
Assuming Dan Quinn and Mike McCarthy are back, who do you think has to earn back more trust and confidence in the Cowboys fan faithful? And just when you analyze this team, who has more work to do to undo the damage that was done at the end of this season, Mike McCarthy or Dan Quinn?
I think fans are probably more critical right now of Dan Quinn than they are Mike McCarthy.
Which is interesting. You never would have thought we would have hit this point.
No. And I think people will have seen what Mike and Brian Schottenheimer and them were able to do with Dak for the majority of the season. I shouldn't say the majority. From week 6 through, the end of week 17, week 18, Dak Prescott was an MVP, was in the MVP conversations.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of that had to do with Dak. I really do. But you got to give Mike credit for working with him. Dak talked about how Mike helped him and all that. To me, I kind of feel like that's kind of just, trying to show support. I just would like to one time hear Dak, say, damn, I wish we'd have done this, or damn, I wish we'd have done that, kind of a thing, But I think you got to give McCarthy credit and Schottenheimer credit for what they were able to do.
I think just really quickly, I do think that Dak would consider. I do think that there's some honesty there still. I do think that Dak considers getting out of his way a form of credit. Of, you deserve credit for letting me do my thing, for being hands off. I appreciate you not being such a micromanager and letting me do that. So I do think that there is some sincerity there when he says, hey, I appreciate this, because I think he appreciates being able to run it the way he wants.
Dak played really, really well this year. It's just unfortunate that things come down in the playoffs and, they just can't get it done. Dak, he plays beautifully at times. He really does. But unfortunately, the things that plague him when he's not good tends to plague him in the playoffs. And I don't think it's the pressure. I think that he gets really anxious in these games. I mean, he was brilliant against Tampa last year, just brilliant. And so you see that and you think he's just capable. But, Green Bay had a great plan, the way they played him. Green Bay's offense really kind of took it to you in that game. But
absolutely,
I think to answer your question, I think that Dan Quinn has gone from this savior to what the hell was he thinking? And, a lot of it had to do with what the decisions that they made, like I said, at the linebacker spot. And people are wondering why. Well, hell, why isn't Mozzie Smith working out? Why is that not? The injuries to Vander Esch, to Diggs, those were huge. Those were huge injuries. And, you want to say Dan was kind of doing the best he could with the personnel he had, but he's responsible for the personnel too. You know what I'm saying? He really is. You got to give Jordan Lewis some credit for playing a lot better in the last half of the year. We've seen what Bland was able to do. You got to give him credit for that. But there's some things in that playoff game left a bad taste in a lot of fans' mouths.
Yeah, and look, I think that we've got to be careful not to overreact, obviously, to the recency bias of what went on in the playoff game and issues like that, because Dan Quinn has shown that he can do a lot of different things that you haven't seen done here in Dallas with various defensive coordinators for years. His teams generate a lot of pressure. His teams generate a lot of turnovers. Those are two things people wanted to see here for a very long time. Sure. One of the biggest criticisms I always go back to is when, Tyrann Mathieu was available a couple different times, we always heard not a scheme fit, so they're not interested. And it drove people nuts. Sure. I think the biggest credit to Dan Quinn and the thing that's changed in 3 years of him being here is he is one who says, give me football players and I'll make it work. Yeah. I will find something for them to. I'll make J-Ron Curse, who was a special teamer his whole career. I'll make him an impact player. I'll make Marquise Bell play linebacker. This is going to work out. So I think that's where he deserves a lot of credit. And is still an impactful person. But he does have things, and I trust that he'll know this. He has things he has to work on. He's got to figure out this Shanahan scheme. This Shanahan scheme is killing him. Yeah. And I don't know the easy fix for that. One of the big things we talked about this year was motion. If you look at the 4 games where they allowed the most yards this year, Brian, it was to the team that was 3rd most motion at the snap, 4th most motion at the snap, 5th most, and 7th most. Those were the 4 highest yard games. And you've started hearing that kind of coming out of the building a little bit, is like, hey, we really struggle as a defense with handling some of these teams that like to play with motion at the snap and generate some eye candy, and it really makes us undisciplined. And that's something that he's got to get better at in terms of as a teacher and as a schemer and in terms of just coaching guys to be disciplined.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, on all the things with Dan and the one thing I know about Dan is he's not going to run away from that. The offseason now is going to be spent, Dan Quinn adjusted how he went from, he used to call defenses in Seattle and then in Atlanta to where he is now. I mean,
it's different.
When he talked about going into, going and taking and learning and all that, I believe him. There's some coaches that say that I don't believe. I don't
maybe
believe.
In this building.
Yeah, well, I don't believe it. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at on with Dan, because I think he will. I think he'll sit down and say, okay, where are the issues that we had? The biggest problem I had is with this defense, Bobby, is when they gave up big plays, communication was a huge problem. I mean, a huge problem. That Green Bay, the plays that Green Bay made, huge communication problems.
Yeah.
Now Green Bay might have got a little fortunate too. Romeo Doubs, they're running a deep over and they get max protection. They got the deep over covered. And what happens, Doubs is kind of stumbling around and he runs away from Gilmore. And it's like he ran to an area where he knew the ball was going to be. It wasn't like, I don't think it was designed for Doubs to go back inside, go inside and then go back to the outside and then completely lose, unless they're doing a 2-level read. It was almost like that he was just stumbling and falling and, okay, well, I've got to get over here because this is where the ball's going. Maybe he saw the deep over was covered and he tried to get, but the communication, and I don't know if it's Donovan Wilson or, but to let the tight end go like he did, they're just huge, huge plays.
Yeah.
The inside, the in breaking route, one of the first, when the first series of the game, they throw to Doubs on the end and he gets it for 20 something yards. And they've got Curse playing free safety and 3 guys are running with Watson. And you're like going, whoa, this is what the Commanders do. This is what the Giants do. This is what teams that don't play good defense do.
Yeah,
we looked like the Commanders out there, and
you
we
looked like
the
a bad
Commanders in
football
Week
team.
18 is what we looked like.
Yeah.
That's the thing that surprises me the most is, when you start to talk about motion, does the motion affect communication with the Cowboys secondary, or did it? Or did it affect communication with the linebackers and the secondary?
Sure.
They have to determine where the busts and the big plays and the chunk plays, communication issues, or just they did not teach it the right way. I want to believe that they were prepared, but how prepared? That's kind of where I'm at right now.
You are listening to the Love the Star podcast, the Love the Stars and Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Brian, it is now time to jump into our Dean Julia Love of the Star mailbag, get the thoughts of our listeners, some of their questions, their off-season concerns. First one here, this is a choose your own adventure, Brian, okay? This is from Matt Holleran. Which of the following hypothetical duos would you pick to bring back in free agency? Okay, so you get to pick one of these 4.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to say goodbye to the others.
Okay.
Tyron Smith and Dorrance Armstrong.
Okay, hang on a second here. Tyron Smith and D.A., okay.
Yep. Jordan Lewis and Tyler Biadasz, so that's 2 and 63.
Got it.
Stephon Gilmore and Dante Fowler.
Okay.
Tony Pollard and Jonathan Hankins.
Well, okay.
Which one are you going with here?
And I like this. I like this game.
Me too.
I'll tell you what.
Good question, Matt.
Yeah, really good question. Very, very well thought out. Got my nickel. Got that. Time to get my bag. Hold on. Give me the first combination of Tyron Smith and Dorrance Armstrong.
Yeah, I think there are definitely things to like about this, like about each combo. Mm-hmm. Look, when we talk about, I'm
gonna steal this tomorrow for a radio bit.
It's a good question. Good, yep. Matt. You're gonna get some play out of this.
Yep, you're gonna get a radio question tomorrow at 2:40. Krusty's Corner out of this one.
Biadasz is. I know we feel like Biadasz has some limitations. I do have a hard time when we talk about hey, this team needs to get tougher, I do have a hard time walking away from probably one of the toughest players on your football team.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the nastier players on your football team, even though I know there are limitations there. Tyron, you always have the injury question. Is Dorrance Armstrong a more effective pass rusher to me than Dante Fowler? I don't know.
If you put Tyron Smith and Dante Fowler, that would be a no-brainer for me because I love Fowler.
I'm gonna go Gilmore Fowler. Because I do like Fowler, and I know Gilmore has his limitations, but there's a difference to me. There's a difference to me between Gilmore when Gilmore can definitely be your third corner next year with Bland and Diggs.
This team was a wreck without their left tackle. It was Chuma Udoga.
Tyler Smith will be great out there, Brian.
Yeah, but they're not going to play him out there, so you'll stop doing that. I think that the next interesting one was Tony Pollard and Hankins.
Oh, because this defense is different when Hankins isn't in there.
Yeah, exactly.
And but Pollard wouldn't be expensive.
I think that Gilmore, to me, I've got Diggs coming back, Diggs, Bland, and then you'll figure out the nickel from there. But I kind of, man, I hate to lose Jordan Lewis.
Does Bland go back in the nickel? Do you think?
I think so.
And so you just got to find an outside guy.
Yeah, you got to find an outside guy there. So, yeah, I would say that. But the Tyron Smith one, because they think they figured out what to do with Tyron Smith. Don't practice him all week, and then just play him in the games. And then Armstrong. God, it's tough though.
You're saying goodbye to guys you really like.
Well, I'm saying goodbye to. Yeah, I think Jordan Lewis played very, very well. Biotish, I know I need a better center. I'm sorry. I think I'm going to need a better center there.
I get it.
He played several games where he was just fine. He's gotten better with the communications over the years. I just need better there. I really do.
Here's what I'll say. I know you need to upgrade center. I do think you need to find somebody who's going to match his mental makeup, though, in terms of the toughness. And you want to talk about the guy who's going to get in the middle of scraps and stand up for your quarterback and set a like that is Biotish, and you do lose something there. I know you've got to get better just from a talent perspective, but when you're doing that, please find me somebody who matches that, within the scouting process. All right, next question here from Sean Cunningham. If Dan Quinn lands one of these remaining head coach vacancies, does the later timeline to hire a new defensive coordinator put Dallas at a disadvantage, especially since we don't know who he'd bring from the current staff for a potential in-house promotion? I shift on this a little bit, Brian, because I look at this and I say filling out a staff is going to be difficult. But I think if they lose Dan Quinn, I think Joe Witt Jr. could get elevated and get a job there. I think that they could very easily say, you know what, let's call Mike Zimmer. Mike Zimmer wants to get back in the NFL.
I was just writing down names.
Yeah, Zimmer, Witt.
Wink Martindale, Joe Witt. We lost the opportunity. Our guy in Atlanta got hired. I saw where he took a job. I think that the fallbacks. I'll be interested because I think Witt, I think he'd be really loyal to Mike McCarthy. He was with Mike for a long time.
He's been with Mike McCarthy for 14 years of his career.
See, I don't think he leaves Mike's side. If Mike offers him the defensive coordinator job, I think he takes it.
Yeah. And so I think Witt makes sense. Or again, like if you wanted to bring Zimmer back, I think that'd be something. I think the Joneses still think highly of Mike Zimmer.
They do.
And he's a guy who's shown a real adaptability. You were in that building when he was, hey, learn how to coach a 3-4. He's shown adaptability.
He drew Bill Parcells respect because Bill told him, you're coaching this 4-3 for one more year, and then the next year you better learn how to coach a 3-4. And it was a top 10 defense with Datwin and Dexter Coakley playing as the inside linebackers. Yeah.
And doing a damn good job of it.
Yeah.
It was absolutely impressive. So there are some of the names that you can kick around there. Brian, question from Danny Parlay. Are CD and Micah in any risk of not getting extensions, do you think?
I'm thinking about this, but
I don't think CD is. I think CD's here. Micah, I wonder if Micah.
Where were you? Where were all you idiots? And I'm pointing at you, Belt, not our fan base.
And I love Micah Parsons. I think he's a game record.
Sure.
No. You know what it is? You know how I look at it? Because I've said this on the air recently, Brian. You know how I look at this? I just wonder. You see, Micah's gotten a couple different times where he's been a little upset or a little frustrated, and there are those issues. I just wonder if, not necessarily it's like Cowboys are like, we got to get rid of this guy. I just wonder if does it reach a Jalen Ramsey or a Bradley Chubb point where you get near the end of the rookie deal and they're like, look, you want different things. We're having a tough time with some of these growing pains. It's best for both of us. You just go, we'll get the draft capital. I don't think that's likely, but I think it's at least a possibility that it comes to that point at some point.
Brought up that possibility 5 weeks ago and got roasted. Got roasted on it, because, there were things, I asked the question about him slowing down and all that stuff like that, and because you're just watching, and everybody's, what are you doing? You're a hater, bro. And I'm like, fine. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to imitate people, fans.
No, I get it.
But now here we are, where people now are thinking, wow, do we need to pay this guy $30 million a year? And there's a lot of people out there that would absolutely do that. I'm talking about fans. But you're in a situation right now where, you're not going to be able to pay CeeDee Lamb all that money. You're not going to be able to pay Micah Parsons all that money. You got to think about Dak Prescott and what that's all about. So, I think you brought it up about the guys that get to the end of those contracts, and can you get a haul for a Micah Parsons that will help you? And this team loves to draft. But will somebody, and there might be somebody out there that does trade.
And these are just hypotheticals. Nobody freak out in the mentions.
Nobody
Trust me.
Nobody
send anything to fan-sided and be like,
people
former Cowboys scout.
Yeah, get ready. They're going to clip this and they're going to talk about.
We're just having fun. We're in the offseason. We're talking.
Yeah, I'm just telling you right now. Yeah, I expect to have some big firestorm BS thing that somebody clipped and said this and that and the other. Okay?
we had an interesting talk in crosstalk the other day where we had a strong disagreement. I'm curious where you fall down on this. We threw out the question of Chicago has the 1st and the 9th pick in the draft this year.
Yes,
I believe.
Would you trade Micah for those 2 picks?
No. More than that. We said Sean Sharif, who we co-host with, was in strong disagreement with myself and Kevin Hagelin. We both said that if Dallas offered Chicago Micah Parsons for the number 1 pick, just the number 1 pick, we think that Chicago says yes and Dallas doesn't do that.
Well, see, now they
I think Chicago says, I get Micah Parsons, guaranteed star, and I still have the 9th pick. I'll take that.
Yeah.
I don't think they'd give up both of them. But I think they would absolutely. I think Chicago would absolutely say, yeah, sure, you can have the number 1 pick for Micah Parsons.
Yeah, I mean he's a great player. He is an absolute great player.
Would you take that if you were Dallas?
But they did the whole thing with Sweat, right? Montez Sweat. Would you
take that?
The Bears need both those picks. They need offensive players. I mean, they got to try and help some.
Would you take the pick if you were Dallas though? Would you take the number 1 for Micah? And a chance to pick Caleb Williams?
Oh, God. Caleb Williams. I'll tell you what. You could take whoever you think the best defensive player in the draft is. You could take Joe Alt, the offensive tackle from
He's so good.
Notre Dame. If you want a plug-and-play left tackle and don't worry about Tyron Smith anymore and put somebody next to, absolutely. You could absolutely do that. Or you could take that pick and move it down again and take another guy who you want, Yeah.
But
of course, the number 1 pick gives you a lot of flexibility. And again, I know this is going to get clipped, and
it's just hypothetical, guys.
It's just all
we're just having fun.
We're just doing it. We're just doing a podcast here, guys. We just are, and it's crap that they probably wouldn't even do. But
no,
you have to think about. But I think that we're closer now to more people in a situation where they're thinking about Micah Parsons, and they're going, okay. Well, before 6 weeks ago, it's like, stop being an idiot. To today, it's like,
yeah. If you're telling me
that yeah,
which one would, and I don't think either is likely, but if you're telling me which is more likely that the Cowboys could fail to get an extension done and trade CD or Micah, I think Micah is more likely than CD. I think CD ultimately gets done here. I think they buy into CeeDee Lamb's competitive toughness and the type of traits and growth that he's shown. And I just think that that's the reality of what it is.
Yeah.
But all right, that does it for us here today on the Love the Star podcast. We'll have another episode coming to you later this week with a lot of other hypotheticals that will probably anger people. We've also got a lot of draft coverage coming your way here shortly. Free agency discussion. We'll be out at Super Bowl. We'll be recording a couple episodes while we're in Vegas. Brian, what if we do it on that little Ferris wheel? What if we did the high roller? No, the high roller. God, that'd be great then. Imagine if we recorded a whole podcast on the high roller and you're just kind of nervous the whole time.
Why don't we not do that, Bobby? It sounds like a terrible idea.
All right. For Brian Broaddus, I'm Bobby Bell. We appreciate you guys so much for hanging with us this season and into the off season. We'll talk to you guys again later. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest updates. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.